They are the earliest known possible domestic animals from Egypt. Also, the presence of Levantine ovicaprine on the Eastern Desert, not far from the shore of the Red Sea, on two sites, at Sodom Cave and at three shelter sites, should be mentioned, as they are dated to the 7th millennium BC. And last but not least, I have to mention the big research project in the Fayum, which revealed that the Fayumian communities shared many characteristics with the mobile pastoral groups from the Western Desert, including minor role of animal husbandry, reliance on food resources offered by the environment, and partially mobile way of life. Wider view on the Neolithic in Egypt show that the period in question is not uniform and consists of two very important elements, Levantine and African, which are the results of interactions and meeting the others. Unfortunately, the available archaeological and linguistic evidence does not confirm any direct connection between Lower Egypt and the southern Levant, or Lower Egypt and the Western Desert, or the presence of migrants from the Eastern Sahara on the Near East in other parts of Egypt. I know that there are some confirmed genetic influx, but we know nothing more about it. All we know is based on comparative studies of material culture. Let's focus on the African elements. During the Middle Holocene, the Western Desert were seasonally traveled by pastoral groups. The mobility was a form of adaptation. Despite milder environmental conditions, maintaining a human presence still involved considerable risks and dependence on rain and access to drinking water sources, vegetation, and animals. The presence of these pastoral groups could be found in almost every part of the Eastern Sahara. They produce pottery, kept cattle, sheep, and goats, and use white grains. Approximately in 5300 BC, the process of desiccation in the desert began, forcing herders to look for new habitats. Some people found shelters in Isis where water was still available. People moved also to the Nile Valley or southern Egypt and northern Sudan. It has also been suggested that desert groups may also have made their way further north to Lower Egypt. The northern shore of Lake Karun in the Fayum or Wadi El Gamal in the western delta offered the desert people everything they were looking for, namely water and access to many resources, including food and raw materials. Those refugees from the desert came to Lower Egypt with their cultural equipment, subsistence strategies, animals, and pottery production. Due to the specific nature of the environment, they settled down and reduced their mobility to some extent. They moved within a well-known environment, relying on its rich resources. Although they owned domesticated animals, their diet was based mostly on fish. They did not set up permanent settlements, but stopped for longer stays in places where their needs could be satisfied. Moreover, pottery production was adjusted to local conditions. And the hypothesis, which indicated Western Desert as a place of origin of the Lower Egyptian pottery, is not popular, and it was proposed mostly by those who work on the desert materials. But in this hypothesis, pottery is a part of the African pastoral heritage. And of course, the pottery from both regions have similar forms and similar surface treatment. And on the left, you can see the desert pottery from a few locations like Abu Garara, Jara, and Dakla Oasis. And on the right, the pottery from Fayumian, from the Lower Egypt, mostly Fayumian and Merim Dewan. This is the early Neolithic. The forms are really very, very similar. They are very simple and typical for for very early pottery production. Oh, sorry, I cannot. Okay. The ceramic vessels of Lower Egypt early Neolithic may have desert roots. Pottery production in both regions is linked by similar organization of pottery production and taking into account mobility and subsistence strategies, as well as by technological and typological similarities. It's time to move to Levantine elements. The presence of domesticated plants and animals of Levantine origin dated to the end of 6 millennium of 5 millennium BC at other sites in Lower Egypt like Merimde and Sais and also Elomari sites, as well as some features of the ceramic assemblages are most often interpreted as a consequence of the presence of Levantine newcomers who introduced these items into Lower Egypt. Although domesticated animals were known in Lower Egypt in the 6th millennium BC and may have come together with desert groups, it was during the 5th millennium BC that the second wave of their introduction into Egypt took place, probably directly from the Near East. Together with domesticated animals, domesticated grains could have reached Lower Egypt. The process of introduction and adaptation domesticate, it's not clear, why available evidence does not allow for any detailed hypothesis. We don't know, in fact, that there is no agreement between researchers who arrived to Lower Egypt, if they were people of the Yarmoukyan culture or the Lodian culture, or even Wadi Rabah is the last hypothesis proposed by Catherine Stride. And also the time of arrival of newcomers is not clear. And the parallels between local pottery and Levantine pottery may be one of the result of such interactions. And very often similar decoration pattern and similar surface treatment is mentioned in the similarities. And you can see on the left the Yarmoukyan and also the Wadi Rabah herringbone pattern, and on the right the herringbone pattern on vessels from Merimde, and also from, it's also a very interesting Saltman cave. This is the earliest, one of the earliest site from the Eastern Desert when the Ovicar prints were reduced. The origin of prehistoric communities in Lower Egypt are not clear. Their roots are probably local African, and among them the presence of the refugees from the desert is very possible, although the hypothesis is based only on the comparative studies. The subsistence strategies and mobile way of life of the Fayumian bring them closer to desert group that occupied central and northern part of the Western Desert in the final part of Holocene humid phase. The northern part of Western Desert, probably including the Fayum and the Wadi El Gamal, lay in the zone of migration for hunter-gatherers and herders during the early and middle Holocene periods. Traces of their presence have been recorded within the Siwa and Katara depressions and in the Fuda to the northwest. The latest C14 dates indicate that people had already reached the northern shore of Lake Karun in the early Holocene period. The rich ecological niche of the Fayum Depression may have been located on routes traveled by desert groups, as it offers access to water, wild plants, and animals, on which they are survival dependent. Recent research suggests also that groups occupying the younger Neolithic sites at Merimde, Beni Salame at the beginning of Neolithic resembled groups of the Fayum culture in terms of subsistence strategies and ways of life. Natural resources play an important role in their diet, whereas domesticated animals and plants were merely an addition to it. The absence of permanent settlement and other traces of activity in Wadi Gamal may indicate at least partial mobile way of life and movement within well-known environment. In the 5th millennium BC, the groups of newcomers from the southern Levant could arrive to Lower Egypt. DNA studies indicate possible genetic influx from the Near East dated to the Neolithic period. But what I said before, their cultural identity as well as the time of arrival are not clear. What we have in the 5th millennium BC in Lower Egypt could be a result of the interactions between local African communities and newcomers from the Near East, resulting in the introduction of some new ideas in existing local traditions. Meeting the others initiated important socio-economic processes, leading to the formation of complex communities that occupy the Nile Valley and Delta in the 4th millennium BC, the ancestors of ancient Egyptian civilization. Of course, we don't know how this interaction occurred, and I would like, but I'm not able to answer Elena question about how the interactions occurred. So we don't know nothing about direct contacts, exchange of ideas, or information flow. And also the reasons why people arrived from southern Levant, for example, to Egypt are not clear. The climatic changes are mentioned, but also local development of Levantine communities could cause such movement of people. And so just as we have to remember that, in fact, what we have in the early pre-dynastic periods, it's the results of meeting the others. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for these presentations. Are there any questions in the conference room or on Zoom? If it's on Zoom, can you please raise your hand? Or you can also write the question. Okay, if not, yes, okay, so there is one question from Martin Ternovics. I hope I pronounce well.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
I have just one question. Why Yarmoukyan, not Jericho 9? Because both cultures has a very, the same decoration. And we know now that actually the Jericho 9 horizon reach far more southern regions than Yarmouk.
Yes, what I said, I maybe you don't heard that I mentioned Yarmoukyan, Lodian. Lodian is something which is very, it's parallel to Jericho 9. Yep.
It's different name, yes.
Yeah, so this is, I mentioned this I mentioned that if you look to the literature, you can find different hypotheses. And I mentioned that this three great knowledge cultural units were mentioned among those who could migrated, who could to which the newcomers could belong. The Jericho or Lodian 9, Yarmoukyan, of course, and the Wadi Rabba. I'm agree that Yarmoukyan is too early and it's completely different. And in one of my slides, you can see that the decoration of Yarmoukyan is more complicated and more yes. So this is. I only refer to the hypothesis which you can find in like literature and which exist in archaeology of this region.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? I was just wondering, because you showed some potteries from this period of time, if there are any other kind of objects that we found, or we have only potteries and that's all, no other material.
From the desert, we have mostly lithics and pottery. And of course, there are some parallels also between the Fayumian lithics and the desert lithics, because they belong to the same bifacial tradition. The Fayumian site, especially those which were excavated in the early 20s, in the 20th century, were very rich and enormous rich. There are many organic materials were discovered, and the baskets, of course. But now in the Fayum, on the Fayumian sites which were studied or excavated during last few years, 10 years, mostly pottery were found, because this is problem of preservation. And I think Gordon, Carter Thompson and Gardner were very, very lucky to discover such organic materials. But now it's unfortunately mostly pottery and lithics.
Thank you. If there are other questions, okay. Okay. No. Okay. It's just a hi. So okay. So if there are not, oh, okay. Oh yes. Okay. So just because we have some technical problems with the YouTube diffusion, just to let you all know that these sessions now are streaming online on YouTube IFAO channel, and we will try to fix at the lunch break to see what is going on. Thank you. So we can maybe now move to our next speaker, and we will also have some time after for a more larger discussion. So I would like to introduce now Agata Bebel. She's a PhD candidate at the University of Warsaw in Poland, and she works on pulses and their importance in the culture and economy of ancient Egypt from the Neolithic to Greco-Roman period. Thank you. No. Yes.
Okay, so as it was already said, I'm studying the role of pulses in Egyptian history. But today I would like to say few words about another plants that even though they seem to be very Egyptian, they have foreign origin, and I will focus on some selected cases only. So plants were always present in our daily lives, our religion and medicine, and we can say absolutely the same about the lives of ancient Egyptians. They developed great skills in the use of plants. Since the earliest times, Egyptians used plants in diet, cosmetics, perfumery, medicine, and ornaments, as well as building materials. Plants played a great role in Egypt, so they were also often depicted as seen in tombs, like, for example, you can see in here. And here. Here's another example of depiction of the plants from Egyptian tomb. Nacht used to be a gardener, and here you can see him preparing some garlands and bouquets. Of course, they were also depicted in palaces as well. So here you can see the depictions of plants from Amarna's painted pavements. They were also depicted in temples, and here you can see fragment of botanical garden of Tutmosis III. They were also depicted on daily life or funeral objects, as for example on this casket from Tutankhamun's tomb. They were also part of jewelry, as you can see, for example, here. And they were also depicted as fragments of models. And here you can see sycamore figs depicted in the model of from the tomb of Meketre. Some of the plants were depicted so often that they instantly remind us of Egypt. And I would like today say a few words about these plants that, at least for me, seem very Egyptian. I decided to look for these plants in Egyptian texts and most known depictions, because where to find something more Egyptian than in Egyptian texts and depictions, of course. Plants are very frequently mentioned in Egyptian texts. Most often these are economic texts or medical texts, and here you can see the example on the papyrus of Ebers, which says about the use of castor roots. We can find some mentions, some references, plant references, also in literary text as well. Another source to study Egyptian plants, other than texts and depictions, are the exact plant remains that we can find in Egypt. Like, thanks to the optimal environmental climate conditions, plant remains usually preserve very well in Egypt. So we can find some plants as garlands, like, for example, from the tomb of Ha, bouquets, offerings in tombs, or we can find sometimes just plants remains as food wastes at archaeological sites. But okay, let's move to our topic. So, to the Egyptian landscape. What are the most Egyptian plants? For me, it was always doom palm, date palm, sycamore, poppies, mandrakes, and cornflowers. And you can see all these plants on the depictions from the Senegen tomb and the tomb of Nebamun. But also you can find also them in text. Like, for example, text dated to the reign of Merentach describes the beauty of the city of Pyrameso and how it was rich in pomegranates, apples, olives, and figs. Greek authors stated also that lentils were also very popular in Egypt. Let's take Athenaeus for an example. He noted that you people of Alexandria have been brought up on lentil food, and your entire city is full of lentil dishes. So, as I said, all of these plants seem to be very Egyptian, but either are they originally Egyptian? And of course, as you can guess, the answer is no. I will start with the pomegranate. Here you have few variations of the Egyptian name of pomegranate. Let's say it was something around Inhemen, but it could change through the time. We can find pomegranate in Egyptian art, literature, and diet. There is no doubt that the tree and its fruits were extremely popular. The tree is not native to Egypt and was possibly first introduced during the New Kingdom as a result of numerous campaigns in Western Asia. Most likely it was introduced from Palestine, and the earliest remains in Egypt were found in Tel Daba in Delta, a site that was inhabited by Hyksos. First time pomegranate is mentioned in text during the 18th dynasty, and it was Papyrus Ebers, the one we saw a few minutes ago. And in this time, it was also depicted for the very first time in Egyptian tombs. According to Theophrastus, Egyptians developed better mutation of the plant, and the fruits gained a wine-like taste. As the tree gained more popularity in Egypt, its occurrence, of course, increased. It became one of the trees that decorated the gardens, in particular of the royalty and the elite. Fruits are very nutritive. They were consumed as a raw fruits or as juice or wine. Sometimes it was also added to grape wine as well. It appeared in artistic representations as a very frequent motif in tomb and temple decoration. It was also a votive object to gods and kings in the form of fruits or some just floral compositions. It was also used in daily life for its medicinal properties to treat illnesses, like, for example, expelling tapeworm, dysentery, diarrhea, stomach ache. It was probably also used in the manufacture of myrtle perfume. Moreover, its rind was known for the ability to dye leather and textiles. It was a symbol of life, fertility, and abundance. And here I would like to show you a few examples of pomegranates as seen by Egyptians. Here you can see the bowl of pomegranates from British Museum dated to New Kingdom. So the pomegranates remains per se. Here you can see the depiction of pomegranates from the tomb of Nacht, dated to 18th dynasty. You can see the pomegranate tree just above the head of the women. And you can see pomegranates carried by the men on the bottom part of the slide. Another example, pomegranate beads dated to New Kingdom. It was a part of the whole collar made of these kind of beads. And here you can see another necklace with pomegranates bead pendants from Bologna Museum. And here, two bottles in the shape of pomegranate from Metropolitan Museum of Art. And here you can see the depiction of a gardener under the pomegranate tree. So now you know how Egyptians used to see pomegranates and how they used to depict them. But I would like now to move to another plant. For me, it's even more Egyptian, seems to be more Egyptian. The common fig were cultivated in Egypt from the very early date, and they were frequently mentioned in offering lists and other texts from the Old Kingdom onwards. Originally, it comes from Palestine as well, as pomegranate. They were introduced to Egypt in the early Old Kingdom. The Egyptian name is dab, and here we have no other variations, so it's much easier than in case of pomegranates. The fig fruit was considered a common food source for ancient Egyptians, hence the figs were frequently presented in offering scenes. Very popular was also a scene of harvesting figs. Fruits were eaten fresh and in dried state, which is very comfortable during the transport. Figs also had magical means and were used to fight constipation, hair diseases, and hair diseases caused by demons. As a disease caused by demon required a drink made of figs, grapes, sycamore figs, honey, and cow's milk, as it's stated in Papyrus Berlin 114. And here, few examples of figs seen by Egyptians from the tomb of Nyan Hnum and Hnum Kotep. And here you can see the harvesting of figs. As I said, it was very popular scene. Here, exactly the same scene, harvesting of figs. And here, okay, you can see that more or less. On the first depiction, there are figs as offering, And on the second depiction, the bigger one, you can see the name. You can see the name of the figs in the offering list from the tomb of Kar and Idu in Giza. Here you can see harvesting of figs once again, but with a monkey helper, which was usual. It happened very often. And here you can see the bowl of figs from Metropolitan Museum of Art. Now I would like to say a few words about another plant, Persa tree. It was so popular in Egyptian art and religion that we cannot imagine the Persa originally comes not from Egypt, but from Ethiopia. It appeared in Egypt very early and became extremely popular. It became so popular that Theophrastus claimed that it grows only in Egypt. The tree is called ishet or shawab. The fruits are called ishet. Persa was depicted very often, but when not described, can be mistaken with a mandrake fruit. Fruits were found in burials from the Old Kingdom onwards. First remains of Persa were found in the Third Dynasty tomb in Saqqara. And here you can see the Persa fruits, not from the Old Kingdom, but from the Middle Kingdom. Persa appeared frequently in gardens. The twigs were used as a decoration and fruits were consumed. In medical texts, it appears only once by the name shawab as an ingredient of ointment for white spots, whatever it was. The fruits, ishet, are mentioned frequently in non-medical texts, mostly religious, mythological ones. From Middle Kingdom, the ishet and lotus flower were used for funerals. Statues and coffins of the deceased were decorated with garlands of ishet flowers. And here you can see a few bouquets from the tomb of Jehuti, dated to 18th dynasty. And many of them were found also in the tomb of Tutankhamun. And here you have an example of bouquet from the Tutankhamun's tomb. The massive use of Persa for burial suggests local cultivation. So we can be sure that it was locally cultivated in the New Kingdom. In the New Kingdom, the flowers of sacred ishet tree were very much desired by Egyptians, who considered them as life-giving and for that reason called them flowers of life. In the Roman period, plants was dying out in Egypt, so it was forbidden to cut the trees. It has been reintroduced to Egypt at the beginning of 19th century. Persa was of great importance in the temple cult in Heliopolis. The tree was associated with the rising sun. And it was very popular also in Egyptian mythology. The tree is threatened by the snake god Apopis, god of the underworld and symbol of the forces of chaos. And the tree is protected by the cat. In the spell 17 of the Book of the Dead, God Ra, in the form of the Heliopolitan wild cat, cuts off the head of the great serpent Apophis with a knife as it threatens the sacred ishet tree, symbol of the sun god Ra. And here you can see the depiction of the scene from the 17th spell. And another one from the tomb of Senajem in Deir el Medina. Persa is also called a tree of royal annals. Reliefs often depict Seshat or Tot, both ghosts associated with writing, inscribing the leaves of the Persa tree with the royal titulatory and the numbers of reign of the king. The ishet tree also played an important role in the scenes related to coronation and set festivals, where the names of kings were written on its leaves to assure them eternal life and sometimes to legitimize the king's ascent to the throne, as for example, in the case of Ramses I. It seems that originally, when the king ascended the throne, his name was recorded on a golden leaf of a cult object in the shape of a tree. And here you can see also Persia as depicted on two monuments from the Ramses II reign. And here is the depiction of Persia tree in Karnak. The king depicted under the Persia tree is Seti I. And here you can see this function of a tree as a royal animals tree. Next Egyptian plant I would like to discuss today is olive tree. The Egyptian name is Jettu, but here we also have some problem with terminology. The term Jettu appears in 19th dynasty, and it is very hard to believe that olive oil, a basic product of trade from Syro-Palestine most often, was not mentioned earlier. There is also a term Ta Jedet, meaning the land where olives are cultivated. Some scholars state that the term bag should be translated as olive oil. And there is also another term, Ramesid term, Nechech, which is a loan word from the Aegean region. Egyptian climate is not suitable for olives cultivation, and it never was. First olives were imported from Syro-Palestine, not only olives, but olive products in general, wood, olive oil, and the fruit itself. From there, it was introduced to Egypt, but we don't know exactly when. Most often, it is believed that farming of olive trees in Egypt started before 18th dynasty. It is very hard to set the exact date, as it is impossible to distinguish between remains of wild olives and the cultivated ones. So we can't catch the moment when Egyptians started to cultivate the trees. We know remains of olives dated for 12th and 13th dynasty from Memphis. And from the New Kingdom onwards, olive trees appear in the artistic and archaeobotanical evidence. We can find them also in New Kingdom tombs, which is the argument for the local cultivation, because as I learned a few days ago, you can make bouquets or garlands from olive tree only when it's fresh. So it's for sure is argument for local cultivation. Theophrastus, Pliny, and Strabo claimed that olives were cultivated in Egypt and that Egypt produced olive oil. It is confirmed by olive remains from this period. The biggest plantations were located in Arsinoe and near the Mareotis Lake. From the very beginning, when olive oil was still imported, it was a luxurious product meant only for the elites. But olive stones can be found in workers' settlements in Amarna and Deir Medina as well. Olive oil was also used as a fuel for lamps, as offering for gods, was used also in production of cosmetics, but there is no evidence for the use of olive oil as a medication. And here you can see the depiction of a hand clutching an olive branch from the Amarna period. Here are the partially preserved, let's say, olive garlands from the Tutankhamun's tomb. And here you can see the collar from Tutankhamun's tomb made with olive trees and with other flowers. And here are also bouquets from the tomb of Jahuti. And last but not least, for me, one of the most Egyptian plants, and it's not why It's not because I'm working on pulses' role in Egyptian history, but for me, the plants from the Fabaceae family, pulses were, in my mind, they were also always very Egyptian. But to be honest, I always consider lentil as originally Egyptian plant. But one day during my seminar in Polish Center, my supervisor noticed that the Egyptian word for lentils seems not Egyptian at all. So I started to looking for the reason of that. So according to the Vartavan Codex, first cases of lentils from Egypt are known from Neolithic, from Merinda and Mahdi. We know also a few examples from pre-dynastic and early dynastic times. The one example from Old Kingdom, from the third dynasty, from Saqqara, few examples from Middle Kingdom, few from New Kingdom, including a basket of lentils found in Tutankhamun tomb, which probably was imported as it is a luxurious funerary gift. And only one from the third intermediate period. The first mention about lentils in text comes from the 19th dynasty, so very late in the history of Egypt. But it is possible that Egyptian had also another word for the to determine the plant, because if the plant was present in Egypt since Neolithic, it is very hard to believe that they just didn't name that plant. There are no known depictions of lentils in Egyptian art. There is no evidence of use of lentils for other than culinary purposes. We know that Copts used, and they still use, lentils in medicine. So it is very hard to believe for me that Egyptians didn't do that. For sure, there are some unpublished findings of lentils at Egyptian sites, but still, comparing to other plant remains, lentils are still very scarce. So, as we can see, in the case of lentils, it's not so evident. It seems to be very Egyptian in our minds, but on the other hand, the evidence of lentils in Egypt are very scarce. Here you can see lentils from the site of Samarra in Delta in Egypt from pre-dynastic periods. I used to work as archaeobotanist there, and these lentils come from my samples. In Greco-Roman period, the diet changed and lentils started to gain popularity. As I was saying at the beginning, Athenaeus claimed that lentils were very popular, especially in Alexandria. Strabo stated that Egyptian workers in pharaonic times used to be fed with lentils. So it seems that they were not popular until the Greco-Roman times. Okay, but what about the name I started with? Egyptian name for lentils is Arshan, which sounds, as I said, not Egyptian at all. I found out that the name comes from Hebrew. The singular is Adasha and the plural is Adashim. And we know in linguistics that there is this phenomena called rotacism, where D might change to R or R might change to D. So it seems very possible that the name came from Hebrew. Probably the Hebrew name took its start with Akkadian. The core she or shu means seeds. Gutur she means lentil seeds. In Hurrian language, shu means pulses. There are also some Mesopotamian recipes for arshun soup, but there is still no agreement what kind of soup it was exactly. In Arabic, lentil is called ades, so it's still, yeah. So it's very similar to atsha, atshim, and so on. It is also very interesting that Coptic name for lentils is arshin, while for chickpeas is ershish. So probably the words they come from one root, meaning the pulses in general. So like in Hurrian language, it was only shu for all the pulses. We know that for sure lentils were very popular in Mesopotamia, and they were domesticated somewhere in the Southwest Asia. Egypt lies outside the region where white lentils grow. And the same we can say about the antiquity. It was always outside this area. In my opinion, Egyptians brought lentils, other pulses probably as well, from Asia, and most likely they just never changed the foreign name of it. Unfortunately, due to the lack of the sources, for now, we can't be sure how exactly and from where Egyptians brought lentils. But as I said, the foreign name could be a hint that it's not Egyptian plant. The word arshin is known from the 19th dynasty. As I said, it is very strange that it wasn't in use earlier. But maybe Egyptians used to have another term for lentils, as I said, and the 19th dynasty word arshin means some kind of new variety, some kind of new species of lentil brought from abroad, because as probably you know, there are at least few types of lentils. Now I would like to head to the short conclusion. Today I wanted to show you that some of the plants that are considered to be very Egyptian were imported, and I think I made my point. Reason for the import of plants were very prosaic. Egyptians brought plants to Egypt because of their medical or nutritive values, because they were useful in daily life activities, or simply because they like their decorative aspects. Plants in question quickly became inseparable part of Egyptian art, culture, religion, and economy. The only exception is lentil. The name suggests its foreign origin, but data suggests that the assimilation was not so fast and not so total as in the other cases. It is possible and mentioned in classical texts, the Greek and Latin ones, that pulses were kind of impure. They were considered as a kind of taboo. How Egyptians brought plants to Kemet? During their military campaigns or trade expeditions. And of course, we all know the story of Hatshepsut's expedition to Punt, or the botanical garden of Tutmosis III, but I think that this is a topic for completely another speech. Thank you very much for your attention.
Oh, thank you, Agata. Are there any questions in the room? Yes, Filippo?
Thank you very much. That was very interesting. I was wondering if you knew of the evidence of olive trees in the Saqqara necropolis, which were found by the British in the 70s in the Sacred Animal Necropolis. And there was this garden, and they found around 36 tree holes. But of course, we are in the middle of the Memphite necropolis, so there's no water whatsoever, even though there are theories about the lake of Abu Zir. And I was wondering, what did you think about growing these plants outside of the Greenland and deep in the desert, if it was possible, and how long these plants could have lasted without direct sources of water?
It was extremely hard. That's why olives were never as popular as pomegranates or persatris or figs, because they have higher needs. And we know remains of few olive groves in Egypt, but they didn't last very long. No, it was like several years maybe. As you know, the olive tree is very long life. So it was very hard to cultivate olives in Egypt, always.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your interesting talk. I just would like to ask about the criteria on which it's based. It's a foreigner or not Egyptian. For example, we say that Shaddah or Dab, the fig, Bromigant, that they came from Palestine. Is this based on that it's attested first on Palestine sources? Or because we find burials for non-Egyptian in Egypt, they do have this on popular or uncommon?
No, this explanation is based on genetic evidence and on the geographic location of the finds. And we know that the plant grows in wild in the region of Palestine. So probably it came from there to other places in the world.
Okay. The second point in relation to the lentil, I mean, because some scholars say it's a non-Egyptian word. So this is take us to a broad issue or problem in Egyptology. If someone or an object does have a non-Egyptian name, do we consider him or her or it, I mean, not Egyptian? So for example, the name of Yoya, I mean, in the time of Amenhotep III, he does not have an Egyptian name. So this makes many scholars say that he is not Egyptian. So when we look to the burial, the object, the funerary customs, it confirms on the ground that he is Egyptian. So it's just a clarification.
Yes, yes, of course. Sometimes Egyptian objects or Egyptian people could have foreign names, and it doesn't mean they aren't Egyptian. But we're pretty sure that pulses were never native to Egypt. The wild pulses grow in Western Asia, Southwestern Asia. So they were domesticated somewhere in there, and Egyptians had to brought them from there to Egypt. It was impossible that domestication took place in Egypt.
Another point in relation to this, as sometimes we relies on the biblical studies. So in the Holy Quran, it said that the children of Israel, I mean, asked Musa to get back to Egypt, Moses to get back to Egypt because he would like to eat from its garlic, beans, and at the same time, the lentil. So, and this is if you compare, I mean, where do they places Musa in relation to the chronology or the timeline? I mean, it's the New Kingdom, and the Holy Quran refers to this as well, more or less in the time of Musa. So it's another clarification. So yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think there is one question on Zoom from Professor Julia Budka.
Yeah, thank you so much. I hope you can hear me. Thank you so much for your very interesting presentation. And I have a kind of a follow-up question now on the question of pulses. I completely agree with you that we do have a major problem here because they are very often unrepresented in the archaeobotanical remains. And this is an issue, of course, so you mentioned this. I just wanted to point out to you that there have been lentils found in New Kingdom Nubia. So the Amara West team by Neil Spencer and the archaeobotanical work was carried out by Philippa Ryan. She identified lentils in this New Kingdom colonial context. So I don't want to I cannot answer the question where lentils are coming from, but we have to assume that they were common in New Kingdom cuisine, let's say it like this, and we are still lacking a lot of evidence. So, for example, in my excavation on Sai, my archaeobotanical person was not able to identify lentils, but we only had very, very little pulses. And he told me, for him, this is not evidence that it was absent. It's just really something where we need more data and more research. So yeah, just a short comment from my side, but thank you so much again.
Thank you. If there are any other questions on Zoom or any other comments also related to the previous presentation?
Thank you for your presentation. So I have a small question, please. I would love to know if the Greeks and the Romans who live in Egypt are influenced by the Egyptian plants and use them to decorate their buildings or tombs, or if those foreigner people introduce some kind of foreigner plants to Egypt during this period or not?
Like, yes, as I said, the pulses gained popularity during the Greco-Roman period. And yes, of course, Greeks and Romans, they used Egyptian plants for the decoration.
So just a short comment. Thank you very much for this interesting presentation. But indeed, I'm agree with Dr. Ahmed Mikawi about what he said. So indeed, the absence of any evidence in archaeological finds and iconographical or textual evidences and resources, it doesn't mean the absence of this plant in Egypt. So, for example, the lentils, for example, it is well used in Egypt since a long time. So it is a little bit tricky. So you have to be cautious for this.
Yes, yes, I know. Thank you very much. Yes. That's why I would like to examine that during my PhD.
Thank you. So if there are no any other questions or comments, we can maybe close this session and for the lunch break, and we will come back in 1 hour. Thank you very much for following us.